So welcome to this review. What is the objective of this review? Well, the objective of this review is to just go through the preseen material with you. I'm doing this in conjunction with PQ Magazine. It's free of charge. And if you are not familiar with PQ Magazine, it's definitely worth having a look. They give a lot of useful insights to help you pass your accountancy exams. If you don't know who I am, my name is Sean Purcell. I work with the ACCA as an expert tutor on SBL, and I also run some online courses, but that's not the purpose of today. I'm not going to try and sell you anything. All my courses sold out a long time ago, and really the objective of this webinar is to make you fully familiar with the preseen so that you can basically give the best possible version of yourself in the exam. Yeah. So you can be done with SBL. You might be done with exams forever. So that is the agenda. If you are not here to look at the preseen, well, thanks, but maybe time to go. So what am I going to talk about? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is what is the purpose of the preseen material? Yeah. Now, this is from the examiner's mouth. As I say, I work with the ACCA, helping them provide insights into bits of ACCA and helping train tutors and stuff like that. And it's really important for you to understand what the preseen is and what the preseen isn't. And in terms of what it is basically designed to help you become familiar with the business activities that are in the case and the industry which it operates. So I'm assuming you have read it and you'll know that this time it's all about a vet. Yep. And I'm going to go through it methodically, but yeah, exactly. What else? Well, what the examining team do the preseen for is so that you can familiarize yourself with any terminology, so that when it comes up in the exam, in maybe one of the extra exhibits which are released on the exam day, no surprises. Yeah. And then finally, the preseen material is designed to basically give you a background, give you context, but it's not designed to say, hey, here's a question on this, learn this, be a question on this. And it is also not requiring you. I see some people on Facebook sharing accounts of vet companies and stuff like that. There is no expectation of that. There is no detailed knowledge of the industry expected, but the terminology, the context, the situation that's mentioned in this preseen, you should be familiar with it. So what I've done, I have got the preseen and I've annotated it all for you, and I'm going to go through it, but I just need to get hold of it. I'm just going to open. Okay. So preseen material that I have here, you're familiar with it. You've got the contents there. I can see a chat box now as well. So if anyone has got any problems, just pop something in. So what do we have? I will send everyone who has enrolled for this webinar, I will send you a annotated PDF of this video. So there's no need to take lots of notes here, but let me explain them. So on the very first line, we see that PVS is a limited company. Okay, so Procuro Vet Services is a limited company. What does that mean? Well, what it means is it's not publicly quoted. And if it's not publicly quoted, it doesn't have the opportunity to raise as much capital as it would if it was a company quoted on the stock exchange. So remember that. Think about that. It's not a publicly quoted company. What else does it say? Well, it says it's the 5th largest organization in our land. So that makes it sound like, oh, it's quite big. Well, if you look at the figures, it's got kind of like, I think it had 6% of the market. So it's not that big. The top three had 23%, 16%, and 13%. So they're much, much bigger and have much superior economies of scale and, more cash and everything else. So you should be familiar with that. What else? Well, if you know nothing about what a vet does or a pet services business does, here you get the context. So, people keep animals as pets. When they get sick, they take them to a vet. That's kind of how it works. And then what it says something about a vet, and a vet is a profession which obviously creates a barrier to entry for anyone entering that profession by requiring anyone who wants to become a vet to go to vet school for 5 years and undergo lots of training. So if we need more vets, we can't just go down the shop and buy a load more vets, or just say, here, go on a course and you're a vet. It will take, 5 to 7 years for someone to qualify as a vet. So we need to be aware of that. It then talks about what they do. So I'm sure you appreciate what they do. And then it talks about how the services are provided. They have a consultation, and the average consultation takes about 15 minutes. So they're probably not going to be able to see more than about 4 people an hour if 15 minutes is the average consultation. Yep. So if there's anything about figures or anything like that, bear that in mind. It's about 4 people an hour. What else do we have here? Well, it talks about how the number of pets are increasing. It's talking about that businesses are now growing, and the smaller ones are not achieving cost savings that the bigger ones are. So obviously, as the bigger people get bigger, they get superior economies of scale, and the people who are small, even like PVS, are going to be potentially pushed out of the market by those people who are price sensitive. Yeah. So that's something. And it says acquisition activity is going to continue over the next 5 years. So be familiar with that. And then also it's talking about pet food people have seen the opportunity for linking with vets to maybe sell their pet food. And they've obviously got lots of cash, and they're coming into the market as well. So there we have it so far. What else do we have? Well, there we see that there are still almost a third of the market operating using smaller practices. So there's over a third which are operating using smaller practices. And so there's still plenty to go for. What else? Well, it talks about revenue. The revenue over the last 5 years is maybe, the growth has been 3.5%. It's going to be almost 7% in the next 5 years. So it's almost going to double. So if you are getting some figures in an extra exhibit and you think, well, it's only went up 3.5%, it does say it's going to double, but that should contextualize the realisticness of growth that might be suggested to you. So make sure you have a look at that. But remember, always be skeptical. There's also going to be healthcare plans going to grow. But remember, a healthcare plan has nothing to do with being a vet. A healthcare plan is linked to, it's like a financial services thing. It's an insurance. But that's how people are going to afford to pay these vet bills. Okay. What else do we have? Well, we also have, different attitudes to pets. They're kind of part of the family. People are going to spend money on their pet quite a lot more. Yeah. And be quite happy to spend their disposable income on vet services. So that's where the revenues are coming from. Appreciate that. What are the costs likely to be? Well, the costs are all the things you would imagine: drugs, bandages, premises, those kinds of things, marketing, and that kind of stuff, staff cost, training. They're going to be your main costs. And who are the clients? Well, the clients as pet owners have changed a little bit. And previously they were older And the clients, it says here, used to be over 35. So as people over 35, that has now moved to people aged 16 to 34. Now, I'm not sure what you want to conclude from that, but do they spend more money? Do they spend less money? Are they going to be people lasting longer? I'm kind of on the fence. I mean, I hope this doesn't screw the things up. I just need to let people in who can't get in. Well, I'm going to have to watch the recording until we get a moment. What else do we have? We have people or pet owners wanting to travel easily to see their vet. That's what they want. So we need to bear that in mind as well. Just let me see. Okay, sorry about that. The screen might have flickered, but some people are trying to get in. Where were we? We were talking about how some clients were also price sensitive. So they benchmark their fees and they happily move to another place if fees become too high. Okay. So they are price sensitive, but then it says something later about why people like PVS. What else has been happening in the industry? Well, it's been difficult to get staff. So staff have some power, particularly vets and nurses. We've already said it takes a long time for them to train. And there has now been a nationwide shortage of vets. So you've got a nationwide shortage of vets. Yeah, that's a bit of an issue. What else? Working conditions aren't great, long working hours, which are going to draw on the availability of vets even more. And they've got mental health issues and stuff like that. It also says client loyalty is quite low. Yeah. So that means they, are happy to switch. Okay. I'll come back. I'll come back to answering your questions in a moment. Let me just go through what is in here, and then we can have a little bit of a chin wag with regards to what we think is going to come on. So we've got here the different competitors. Big budget pet stores in the UK. You might be familiar with people like Pets at Home, and Pets at Home is kind of a supermarket with all pet stuff, and they give advice, but they don't necessarily give advice from vets, but from assistants. So that's going to be cheaper. In the UK, they actually do have vets as well in the store. But yeah. What else do we have? We have online pet medication providers. So who are these? Well, these seem to be people who we can get prescriptions from if we don't want to get our prescription from the vet, which is interesting. And then we've got telehealth, which seems to be like online veterinary services, which might be the future. Yeah. So interesting, the dynamics there and where you potentially could go. What else? Well, it mentions about a carbon footprint. So if we were talking about a carbon footprint, do you know how you measure your carbon footprint? Do you know about EMAS reporting? Yeah, you should do if you don't, because yeah, that's potentially something. Talks about technology being a big thing in the future, using AI. So yeah, that's something we also need to be aware of, and also need to be aware of that as it gets bigger, this technology is going to demand more cash because it's quite capital intensive. So you clock that maybe. Okay. Also, it's being used by the big players. So the top three, which were GLOAS, Bellstone, and HUD Group, they're using it to market their services. Yeah. Does PVS market their service that way? No, they don't. No, they don't. So maybe a bit on marketing and IT. I'll talk more about it in a moment. What else do we have? Well, we have the industry bodies. So these are the people that police whether you can be a vet or not. So the professional associations, they could actually say, no, you can't do that because it is not in line with our professional standards. So they're a powerful stakeholder we should be familiar with. We should also be familiar with the power of unions. Yeah, this was an interesting one, which goes back to what was said earlier, that they have to put a notice in the vet surgery saying, look, you can get a prescription and get your drugs elsewhere. And the person who might provide drugs elsewhere would be that online veterinary service business we talked about. So the ability to, because it did say they are keeping their fees relatively low, but are bumping up the drugs. Well, if the drugs go too high, people won't buy from the vet, they'll buy from this online services company. So that's one to think about. We then hear all about PVS. It grew organically. If it's going to grow, it's going to have to grow via acquisition because it's got to grow quickly. So they've got no experience of growing via acquisition. You're going to, if you are growing via acquisition, going to have change management problems. So yeah, they're quite big. It talks about their clinics, gives you a bit of information. They've got 860 vets, 925 vet nurses, but still quite small. Yeah. It talks about how people prefer them because of their location, their innovation, and their quality of service. But then it kind of contradicts that, where it says, increasingly their sales have declined, and they've declined every year since 20XO, and maybe because of competitors who are cheaper. So, okay, location, innovation, and quality of service is really important, but people aren't that bothered about that. Okay, it then talks about the board, but don't forget it's a board, it's not a public limited company, so don't get too upset about the fact that there's only one NED. The board all have equal shareholding, so as equal shareholders, there's no one dominant player who can, have big influence on the board. It's not listed. It said that right at the beginning. They don't have an audit, nomination, or remuneration committee. They don't need to, and lots of companies don't have that. It then talks about the people, and the one thing that came to my mind here was the fact that it mentioned about talent management. So if you don't know what talent management is, please make sure you do, and what it involves and what it covers. Okay. It then talks about decision-making is centralized. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, not unless that there is a big disparity in the cost of living. And then it talks about the fact that technology, about recording information, yeah, it's used by PVS, but it's pretty old stuff. It's 8 years old, which in the world of technology is very, very old. It does use emails. It hasn't, it's yet to make any investments. So we need to be up to speed on our technology. Yep. And then we have, it hasn't done much innovation. It used to, but it hasn't done much new innovation. It has introduced a healthcare plan, although, it's not going amazing. And then it talks about its suppliers. So suppliers are obviously going to be the drug people. The thing that came out to me there was one of the suppliers was actually, is mentioned here, Gloas, which is one of their major competitors. So they could have significant influence on the business if they had monopolistic position. It then gives you some risks. So you need to understand how those risks would manifest themselves, and you need to know what impact they would have and how you would mitigate them. So just make sure you're happy with that. And then it gives you some financial information. But on the financial information, remember, you're operating as a strategic business leader. Okay, so as a strategic business leader, you're not going to get dragged into the minutiae of detailed. So keep your financial information at top level, strategic level, not operational level. So there's the pre-scene that you have read. You might want to listen to the video again in your own time. Let me open up a bit more. I don't know why, but there are some people locked in the waiting room. But hey, I'm not sure how we get them out. Normally you just click a button. But so there we have it. What I want to do is, okay, so just let me know in the chat box that you can see the screen. Okay, thank you. I do apologize, those people who got stuck in the waiting room there. I am recording this, and I will send a recording to the people who are registered. We have been going about 26 minutes now, so we have been talking a bit. We've just reviewed all of the preseen, and I can send you an annotated PDF if you are registered. So, reminded you on the aims of the preseen. Having just been through the preseen, let's have a think about what we need to prepare for. And just remember, I'm not question spotting here. This is not what the ACCA has designed the preseen to do, but it has opened up some information for us. And there are things that are likely to happen to that business. If I was a management consultant advising it, there would be things it needs to do. The first thing it needs to do is probably ensure its cost base is competitive. And to do that, it probably needs to get bigger. So it probably needs to acquire people. So how could it acquire people? Well, maybe it might decide to float itself on the stock exchange. So you might need to appreciate when you list your company or float your company on the stock exchange, you know, the hassle, the cost, but also the benefit that revenue can be achieved. So I run some courses and I write mock exams. And once this came out, I included in my mock exams, not saying it's going to be a question in the exam, but I did make my students do a question on benefits of floating, just so that they appreciate that. So revisit that in your studies, just to appreciate the hassles of floating, but also the benefits. If they're going to have a cost base similar to the top 3 players, they need a lower cost per unit, which is achieved by economies of scale. Yeah, so that's really important. Okay, what else? Well, there are quite a few people involved in the dynamics of this business. You've got unions, you've got professional bodies, you've got the vets, you've got suppliers. You need to look at those and appreciate how much power do they actually have, how interested are they, to appreciate how much influence they have as stakeholders. And again, I put a question in there about stakeholders when I did my mock, or one of my mocks. If we do become floated, we're obviously going to have corporate governance issues. So their current corporate governance setup is not appropriate for a listed company. And you need to talk about what needs to be introduced. You need to understand about how the agency problem of being a public company. So make sure you get your head around all of that. If they do acquire other companies, those companies are going to have to be integrated within PVS. To integrate them requires change management. When you try to integrate other businesses, there's always change management issues. So appreciate how we manage change, appreciate contextual features that can affect change. Yep. So make sure you are happy with all of that. What else? Well, it talks about IT. IT was not really well done. They don't really do very good marketing. So have a look at this article, the ACCA article on e-marketing. If you are a bit rusty in the area of remarketing, it's definitely worth brushing up your knowledge on that. So when we talk about e-marketing, we're talking about the 6 I's. We're talking about e-marketing allows for individualization. So, you know, once you've got a profile of a customer, you'll know what their pet breed is, you know where they live. You can do all kinds of, I mean, so that's what big data analytics is, and that's, you know, individualized marketing. You can integrate it into your CRM system. You can do all kinds of things. So read the article anyway. What else should you be looking at? Well, because there are multiple stakeholders, how do we communicate to multiple stakeholders? Well, a pretty common way we communicate to multiple stakeholders is through integrated reporting. So do you know what integrated reporting is? Do you understand? There was a question specifically asking about capitals once, and you should appreciate the capitals, but I would have a look at some FTSE 100 companies and see what their integrated reports actually look like. Yeah, they don't necessarily say it in the form of capitals, although one exam question did ask that, and I kind of did a variant on a theme for my students. It talks about the carbon footprint of vets. So obviously, how do we measure this? What can we do? You should appreciate that. Most companies do that. You should understand about, you know, how we report environmental stuff, EMAS and the like. It gives some risks, so appreciate their impact, appreciate how you're going to mitigate them. Maybe they're going to buy another company. It's not unusual for you to be asked to evaluate an investment, but the danger, and remember, you are a strategic level student. You've passed all the little mathematic exams, applied skills and stuff. You've proven you can do that. Yeah, this is an applied exam, not a technical exam. Do not get dragged down into the minutiae of simple little accounts. Yeah, it can be really killing on your time, which is one of the major causes of death in exam, poor time management. Yeah, so that is a load of stuff to have a look at. I've had a few questions from people, which I'll share with you and answer with you, and then maybe if you've got some questions, I can talk about them. Yeah. So questions flotation and corporate governance issues. Sorry that I didn't click that one. So questions. So if you did a mock and you got below 50, this was someone, can I still pass? Of course you can. If you're getting proper feedback. So I do lots of mocks and homeworks with my students, and I don't just give them a mark, I give them loads of feedback, more white space, more subheadings, expand your sentences, no bullet points, and so on and so on. And as long as people, and hopefully you're getting some similar feedback from somewhere, and as long as people expand on what they've been told to do and take on board the comments, of course you can still pass. On someone who did a mock with me, I said I needed to develop my points more. What do I need to do to develop my points more? Well, my advice would be, if you develop your points more, first of all, if you just copy and paste out of a scenario or an exhibit, the markers spot that straight away. Yep, they spot that straight away, and there's no marks for that. You need to reinterpret what's being said. And to help you expand your point more, think about, so what? What did I make that point? Why did I make that point? What is the consequence of what I've just said? And that will help you develop. The other thing that will help you, if you can try and picture, this is a vet's business, let's picture it. Yeah, even think about a scenario in your own workplace. Most of us can relate to the workplace, but because we've been brought up on tax exams and financial accounting exams, we believe we have to regurgitate loads of theory. We don't. In the workplace, if you said 5 forces, people would think, what are you talking about? Weirdo. Use the frameworks to help catalyze your answers, but do not reveal them in your answers, is my mantra. And the models are great for helping you get lots of ideas, but they must not be used in your answers. Yeah. So that would be my answer to that. What other questions was I getting? I was getting a question, do I need to plan every task? I don't think I have time. I drill into my students about planning. Plans are for you, remember. They don't have to be beautiful, but they do have to reflect marks, the requirements, the rule of and. Often there's 2 parts and people miss out the rule of and. So yes, you do plan. There's an adage, fail to plan, plan to fail. So please don't do that. What else did I get? What's the best time management strategy to finish on time or manage your time? Maybe I will put I'll put a short little video out on timing, but you should be writing start and finish, and you should be managing your time quite strictly. I say about 30 minutes reading and planning stuff. We've got 109, we've got 3 hours, 15 minutes. So that leaves us with about 160 minutes for 80 marks, because professional marks take no time to acquire. 160 divided by 80 is about 2 minutes a mark. Start and finish on each thing. That's what I use. But I will feel, I could say more here, but I leave because you've got to get over 50 in each of the tasks, and then you pass the exam. I'll put another video out. Maybe I'll put it on YouTube about timing. I've recorded quite a long video on this for the ACCA, which you also may have watched. But I'll try to create a short one for you before the exam, just to get across to you the importance of timing. So yeah, and then someone said, I've just done a mock. What should I do between now and the exam? Consolidate your position is what I'd say. But what about you, and what about any questions that you might have for me, having done that debrief of the mock, having talked about things that are issues? I mean, if there's anything I didn't understand, I suppose, maybe ask me about that. I don't think it's really worth. Is there going to be a question on working average capital? I don't know. I don't know. But I can, if we try to stick to the preseen, anything that's not clear, I can try and help you. So maybe there's quite a few of us online here. So if you could put it in the chat box, that would be great. Just because we'll end up talking over each other. If it was all crystal, again, that's absolutely fine. And we can get another opportunity to ask questions in a moment.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi. I'm just wondering, so I've got the list of what could come up. I've gone through everything.
What could come up? I didn't say that. I said make sure you're familiar with these areas.
Yeah. So, I mean, focusing on these areas, I suppose I'm just feeling a bit overwhelmed because I've gone through everything already and...
Well, you've done great.
Yeah.
What are you worried about? Keep calm. It's natural. Stress is a thing that we have, as well as time. Stress is actually a little wonder drug that helps you perform better in the exam. And just accept that stress is going to happen. Mm-hmm. What tends to happen when people get stressed is they stress about being stressed. And then they stress more about being stressed and stressed. And that's when stress can actually have a detrimental effect on your performance. But you just need to tell yourself, yeah, I'm a bit stressed, but how lucky am I? I've got this little wonder pill, stress, which is creating adrenaline to help me perform better in the exam. Without that adrenaline in my veins, I won't perform as well. And that's fine. And let's leave it as that. Let's park it. If you are struggling to deal with that, I suggest you look at mindfulness and things like that. Mindfulness is a technique you can learn. Mm-hmm. And obviously the exam's getting quite close, but you should have a look at it to help your brain, ignore little like messages in there and just focus on what's important.
Okay.
That's what I'd say. So don't be overwhelmed. Well, it's natural to be a bit stressed and overwhelmed, but you're lucky because you've got that extra little bit of chemical in your system that's going to help you perform better.
And so, like, say, for example, if you're me right now, would you focus on the list of things that potentially...
No, I would make sure I've got a holistic view of the syllabus, but I'd make sure the things I've mentioned are well within my knowledge.
Okay.
That's what I'd say.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I've got Kelsey who's put something in the chat box. Thank you, Kelsey. You mentioned not to specify models in answers, but for example, if an investment question, and I've seen in some model answers, it does display suitable, feasible, acceptable. That's not a model. That's just a way of taking apart evaluation of a strategic option on the table. It's not an academic model. That would be perfectly okay to use. So, and a very good way of evaluating an option that's on the table. And again, I've written a couple of articles that you'll find on the ACCA website on strategic planning process, which is analysis, choice, and implementation. So analysis is internal, which is your strengths and weaknesses, which is your 6 M's. Your opportunities and threats will be inspired by your PESTEL and your 5 forces. And then when you make a choice, we think about what basis, cheap or different. So do we differentiate or do we be cost leader? Do we stay in the same market with the same product or new market, new product? That's Ansoff's product market matrix. And then we should appreciate, do we grow organically, internally? Do we grow externally or do we do a joint venture? And then we then think about, okay, evaluation of an option, and that is it suitable, feasible, acceptable. That's all in an article, 2 articles on the ACCA website. So have a look at that. Hi, I struggle to memorize all the models. There's not that many models compared to something like tax. Is it possible to pass without supplying models? Of course it is, but I'd say the models are really good assists to help broaden your ideas. So there's not lots of models. There's a few, much less than there are on all those technical subjects. So, but if you tell yourself you struggle and I can't do it, well, that's not really the best communication to have with your brain. You want to be telling yourself there aren't many models, and these models are really useful to help me open up my mind and get better answers. That would be a better conversation to have, I'd say. Okay. All righty. Okay, so I am just going to continue then. So thank you for those questions. in terms of lessons learned so I'm going to share with you now. I obviously have had quite a lot of students preparing with me for the June exam. I've done lots of homeworks with them. I've done mocks with them on the CBE platform. And if you've not been on the CBE platform, have a go, do some ACCA mocks there. They're all set up. They're free to do. I use it, but then I get ACCA markers to mark my students' work. And I just want to share with you some lessons. But to be honest, the lessons I've learned after doing this for, decades are really the very similar lessons to what the examining team produced in their most recent examiner's report. So and I think I've done a video for this for the ACCA in more detail, but what lessons can you learn from the examining team? And I think these are great. Well, the first lesson I would say is it's really important to have good layout. And the message I said to my students after their last mock was their layout is looking really good and they need to keep it that way. Yeah. Because you need to help the marker mark your paper and you need to lay it out well. So subheading, white space. So here's an example of a lovely layout. This is just something someone Mark got a very high score for, but deservedly so. They used subheadings. Yep. They left white space. Yep. And that is how a good answer would look like. There was another part of a question which was about integrated reporting, and on a slide question, you have your bullet point on the slide and then you develop your notes. This is where you get your marks. Yeah. So that is how subheading, white space, financial on the slide, financial here, manufacture, intellectual. That's how I want answers to look. Okay. However, even though layout was looking fantastic, some people, because they didn't manage their time, didn't answer everything. That's really dangerous. I'd much rather you got over 50 on all of it, and it's easier to get the first half of the marks than the second half of the marks. Yeah. So take control of your time was what the examining team said in the report, and was what I say every time and have done for years. Yeah. And, to summarize the examiner's report, it pretty much says the same thing every time, even in different incarnations of the SBL exam, which I've been involved with all of them. Yeah. So read that report. It is important. What students did do, though, they did answer all three tasks. They didn't completely miss one out, but they didn't do great time management. And a contributor to poor time management from markers giving feedback was, a lot of explanation of stuff like on the September. So based on the September 2023, they gave a big explanation of TARA. Big deal. The question is not asking you for technical knowledge, but if you were to apply TARA in the context of the scenario on what you might do with the risk dynamics, that would get you some marks, but you're not going to get any marks for telling me what TARA is or PESTEL or anything like that. So be careful. What else? Massive plans. I do think you should write a plan, but you need to remember the plan is for you and nobody else. Yeah. Be also careful on your presentation. Some people do really elaborate presentation, which takes a lot of time. There's not a lot of marks for over elaborate presentation. As long as you do it in the format, that's fine. As I've said, the same point twice, the markers are really tuned into this. Yeah. So be careful. What else caused failure? Well, lack of development. So as I've said to you on looking at the preseen there, think, so what? Why did I make that point? Why? What is the consequence of what I've just said? Yeah. And, you need to apply your point to the case, not a regurgitation. Yeah. To do that, picture it, see it. Yeah. Also, make sure you look at all the information. The examiner's report says students did not analyze all of the information and therefore were not answering the task as they potentially could. And to do that, again, picture it, think, what does the story tell? Yeah. Now, when we get, as we were just talking about stress there, we get flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, which is the stress chemical. It can do funny things to our brains, and we can see questions that necessarily weren't there. So how do we deal with that? Well, when we're not answering the question, my advice would be, and so I haven't got time for this, Don't do this and you potentially go down the wrong road. Read the requirement once, read it twice. Do a quick brainstorm, your brainstorm, do a plan, think about whether that gets you enough marks. Oh, I need a few more marks. Let's get a few more marks. And just before I jump in, I read it a third time. Okay, reading it that third time, and I think, oh, it says just advantages and not disadvantages or whatever. But often when you step out after reading it once and twice, where you can get a bit of tunnel vision because of all that cortisol, you see a different question. Really important, and that can really hurt you in an exam. So please, please follow that advice. If you've got poor technical knowledge, well, we haven't done the work. I'm not really bothered about that. The examiner recommends an appropriate timetable of study, of course, and sometimes said students didn't show a lot of commercial acumen. So what's commercial acumen? Well, I would think of it as if I was spending my own money, and would that be a good use of my money? You know, does it get me a return? Is it worth, you know, it's a bit the thing I often say, would you put £100,000 kitchen in your £50,000 terraced house? That would be nuts. But if you were living in a £10 million penthouse, you would definitely have to put a £100,000 kitchen in it. Otherwise, you'd devalue the property. So that's commercial acumen. Yeah, make sure you do that. Make sure you picture it like I've just done. Don't include irrelevant content and miss out what's in the requirement, which is often the result of the rule of and. Okay, just let me check the question box if we've got anything extra there. No. Okay. So the rule of and is often a question that says blah, 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 and do this. So we've got about a week till the exam. Okay. Key things, rather than cram 24 hours a day, look after your brain. You look after your brain by having sleep. One major damage to your sleep is looking at blue light about 2 hours before bedtime. Yeah. Man City, top goal scorer, wants to be the best goal scorer in the world, which he is, but he wears blue light goggles from 6 o'clock every evening. Doesn't look at blue light, doesn't want blue light from the telly. Yeah. That's why it's so good. So you look after yourself, get your sleep, get your nutrition, and know that you've done the work. You're going to pass this exam. And also, I think, keep your eye on the prize. So the prize is never doing exams again for a lot of us. The prize is earning double or triple our salary in the next 2 to 5 years if it's our last exam, because when you qualify, that's what it gives to you. So, you know, you've invested in courses. It's well worth doing that, because the small beer of course cost compared to tripling your salary, it's a no-brainer. But, you know, you're going to have time back with your friends, your family, your loved ones. Yeah. You're going to do well in this exam. Yeah. You're going to control the things that can potentially derail you, their time. They're not reading the question. They're getting stressed. If you can't answer a question, think, what would I do in the workplace? In this situation in work, what would I do? And that's going to help you. Okay. So I hope you found this helpful. Apologies for those that got trapped in the waiting room. It will be recorded. It takes a few hours to render and all the rest of it. But I will send you a recording through an email which you registered to come onto this webinar. Okay, so thanks very much. I'll also send you the annotated PDF. Keep cool, focus on the marks, manage your time by start and finish. And if you do that, well, you'll be great. I'll wish you good luck, but you don't need good luck. Yeah, just stick to the plan and you'll be fine. And I wish you all the very best. And thank you for your questions. Thanks for listening. All the best.